Hey folks, Jessica here. So before we go any further in this video, you might initially wonder why she's sitting in the dark with no lights on recording a video in the middle of the night. It's not the middle of the night. It's 4 p.m. It's the middle of the day. Let me actually close Granblue because it is casting light on me. This is how bright it is in my room at 4 p.m. This is the same place I record most of my other videos in and relatively the same time of day. So a bit of a difference. The reason it's dark AF behind me is I live in California, specifically in the Bay Area, if you didn't know, and we've been having wildfires for the last month or so. Today, the winds have actually kicked the smoke up to the point where it is partially blacking out the sun. I know, it's super metal. Fallout intensifies. Apocalypse intensifies. It's really wild. I was walking around earlier, and it literally feels like it's evening / I'm stuck in like Fallout New Vegas or something, or like the sepia filter on my eyes broke. But that's why things look like they do. As far as I know, it's not dangerous because the smoke's actually really high up in there right now. But yeah, it's been an interesting day. Having Zoom meetings today been very weird. So today's video is gonna be about Lumberjack, the class. I haven't done a class review in a long time. I kind of stopped doing them because it became significantly easier to unlock the Row 4 classes and the EX2 classes, so I didn't really think they needed reviews anymore. But some folks have pointed out in the comments that actually it's not super obvious how you play some classes or why some classes are good, so I'm going to try and talk about some of the more recent classes and hopefully get everybody up to speed. So let's jump in, we'll look at the Lumberjack skills, and then I'll tell you what I think about the class as a whole. Okay, Lumberjack, and yes, I did turn on the light because it would have been weird I did the whole video in the dark. Before we go forward though, man, the art for this class is amazing. Gina looks like a lesbian Disney princess. I love this art. But yeah, this is a Row 4 class. Technically, it's filed with the rest of the Row 4 classes, but you might consider this an advanced Row 4 class because the more recent Row 4 classes have done this thing where they require you to max out 2 other Row 4 classes first, which might be a stumbling point if this is going to be one of the earlier ones you try to unlock. But this will require Berserker and Elysian both be level 20 before you can unlock it. That's not to say you should expect Berserker and Elysian skills, it's just that's mostly the specialties for this class. It's Axe Harp. That set of specialties, Axe Harp, is actually pretty good because there's a lot of good axes and a lot of good harps, but the primary axe class Berserker is limited in the fights you would use it, and Elysian is also limited these days in the fights you would use it, just as the quality of characters have gotten better over time. So if you want to use an axe or a harp, Lumberjack is a solid bet. Beyond those classes being at 20, you will need 4,000 CP, and you will need 20 4-star distinctions. If you've not seen 4-star distinctions, these are the primary way you get them is from the shop. So if you go to Prestige Pendants, they're right here with all the new ones. That's the easiest way to get them. A thing to note here, by the way, is there's no longer a limit on how many you can trade for of any of these pendants, so that's one of the streamlining things they did to make it easier to unlock classes. So that's a nice thing. Let's jump back. General bonuses, 30% skill damage, 10% healing. The master bonus, which is the bonus you unlock for all classes once you max level this one, that's going to be boost to main weapon's attack when the main weapon is an axe, 3%. I mean, it's nice, but honestly not going to be really applicable to many classes outside of Lumberjack, so take that for what you will. Class weapons, I'll talk about those towards the end. Support skills, Walker Forested Ways. Boost to main character stats as the number of turns passes. It's 3% attack, 3% defense per turn, up to a max of 30. It also increases double attack and triple attack per turn. This is a pretty slow bonus. It's not really suited for anything but a longer fight because it's going to take 10 turns, obviously, for the thing to turn fully on. But that said, Lumberjack is a class that specializes in doing higher difficulty long fights. You don't really want to take Lumberjack as like a farming class for like doing your dailies or anything, because Lumberjack's just not a very bursty class. But for a harder fight like any of the 6 Dragon Advents, Lumberjack is a pretty solid option. Okay, skills. The Lumberjack primary skill, the one you can't remove, is Woodcutter's Song. This is a buff, it lasts 3 turns, it's got a 6-turn cooldown. While it's in effect, it's going to give you a bunch of conditions that you can meet. And when you meet them, the listed effect will happen. This is complicated. It's got its own table. Let's look at it. So there's a common effect and a rare effect that can trigger on each of these conditions. From my experience, don't plan on the rare effect happening. I don't have numbers on how often they do happen. Just plan on the common effect happening. The rare one happens, then it's nice to have, but it's not the one you should kind of play around. So let's talk the specific conditions. The first condition is for every 3 skills used, this thing will happen. Some nuances with that. This counts all skills from your team, not just the main character, so ally skills do work for it. Skills have a 0 turn cooldown, so like Licia suppressing fire, those will not increment this, because then you just be able to spam this. Auto-activated skills do not count, so Black Knight's Onyx Rain, if you click it to cast it, it should count for this. If it gets auto-cast by her health threshold trigger, that won't count for this, so keep that in mind. Skills that activate twice, like Lily's, another example we use is Lily's Frozen Gale or Lucio's Out of Ashes. These only count as 1 activation, they don't count twice. Casting Woodcutter's Song again while it's already active will not increment the skill count, it will instead reset it, so try not to do that because that's generally a bad thing. But yeah, whenever you use 3 skills, it's going to do a 200% elemental damage nuke. It's not a huge nuke. The big thing is it stacks 10% attack down and 10% defense down, up to a cap of 30. You might not think that's a big deal for most fights, but there are fights where this matters a lot, because if you watch my Beelzebub guide, which I just put up, Beelzebub is immune to attack down and defense down, so you can't use Miserable Mist or any effects like that on him. Instead, what you have to use are stacking attack and defense downs, and this is actually essential to defeating him because his autos will just destroy you otherwise. That's why I recommended Lumberjack for most people on that fight. The rare effect is double damage, so it's 400% damage. It still does the stacking attack and defense down, it still stacks at 30, but also gives you charge attack damage up 50% and charge attack damage cap up 15%. Okay, the next bit's going to be a lot simpler. Whenever the main character uses a charge attack, you're going to do a 2% damage nuke. All allies on your team are going to gain a strength buff, so stamina. The rare effect is going to be 400%, and it's going to still give you stamina, but it's also going to give you 30% echo. Very nice. Upon taking damage on the main character, it's going to heal everyone on your team for 20% HP. Before you get too excited about that, that's healing cap of 1000, so it's like not going to be a very big heal regularly. The rare effect though is still a 20% HP heal, but its cap is 3000, which is much better. But in addition to that, it will give all allies shield for 2000. So that's a really nice thing to have. Can't plan around it, but it's nice. Whenever the enemy uses a special attack, it's going to, again, nuke, and it's going to inflict blinded. On rare occasions, it's going to do a bigger nuke, inflict blinded, and petrified. These are all super nice things to have. You kind of get the idea of Lumberjack. It's a lot of effects that, while none of them on their own are super powerful, they're nice to have because they're just going to constantly be going off in the fight. And that's why Lumberjack works well for longer fights, because you've got all this shit just always going off. So let's talk about other skills. Extended Mastery skills. The first one's going to be Laughing Logger. It is 3 turn duration, 5 turn cooldown. It's a small nuke, 400%, and it's going to give you a 70-30 crit buff. Again, how this works is it's going to be a 70% chance to deal 30% more damage. This can be nice, especially if you're in a team that crits a lot, but remember the crit rules. You can only crit if you are superior element to the boss you're fighting, unless the boss is null element. Then you can crit as any element. A few of the skills have this mechanic where the second and third time you cast them, they do more. So this is part of the reason why Lumberjack is, again, for longer fights, because in a short fight, you're not going to cast this thing 3 times. That's going to take 15 turns with a cooldown. So for longer fights, this does become relevant. The first recast gives you Keen. Keen is a supplemental damage buff specifically to critical hits, so your crits are going to hit for 50k more damage. Not huge, but nice to have. And then the third cast, I would say it's actually pretty significant. It's going to give you a 50% damage cap up. Keep in mind though, Laughing Logger only affects main character. It's not a team buff, so it's not that powerful specifically for that reason. If it were the whole team, this would actually be a really strong buff, but just for main character, it's alright. Next skill is Leaf Burning. This one gives you the Leaf Burning buff, obviously. We'll talk about what that does in a second, but also give you a 4,000 damage shield. That is a pretty sizable shield. It does, however, have a 10-turn cooldown, so it's a pretty long cooldown. Leaf Burning, while it's in effect, all allies on your team will gain these buffs every turn. So it's 4% attack up, 4% defense up, both up to a maximum of 20, and then 10% charge bar. That's every single turn to everyone on your team. That's pretty nice. Leaf Burning, however, does end when the shield part of this goes away. So when you take 4,000 damage and a shield breaks, it will end Leaf Burning. It's going to really depend on what fight you're in, because there's some fights where this will never break, and you'll just get maximum all this stuff pretty fast. Then there's going to be fights where the shield's going to get broken pretty much instantly, and it's going to take a while to stack this stuff up. So keep that in mind. Overall, it's still a really strong skill. I like it a lot. One of the reasons is this attack up and this defense up. They only stack up to 20, so they're not that huge, but they're indefinite duration. They never go away. So any turns that you have this up and you're building these things is all gain. And if you manage to keep this up for a long time, that charge bar gain is pretty large. It will be significant over the course of several turns because it hits all allies. So Leaf Burning overall, really good skill. Like it a lot. The final skill to talk about is Dappled Sunlight. Initially, it's a small heal, but like Laughing Logger, it has additional effects the second and third time you cast it. It's a 6-turn cooldown, which is fairly average. The initial heal on it is 10% of all allies' HP, but it's capped at 1500 as its healing cap, which is honestly on the low side. The second time you cast it, it will remove a debuff from all allies, so essentially a clarity effect. And the third time you cast it, you're also going to get a veil on all allies. Once you get all the effects rolling, it's a pretty nice utility skill because it's basically doing all the things you want. It's healing you, it's removing debuffs, it's protecting you from the next debuff. However, before it gets fully rolling, it's not super impressive, especially the first time you cast it, because then it's just a tiny, tiny heal. So you're going to have to keep that in mind when you're using this. You can replace like a clarity in your skill setup with this, and a veil in your skill setup with this, except for keep in mind the soonest you can get the clarity online is going to be turn 6 because of the cooldown. So you're going to have to weigh that in. If you need a clarity really early in the fight, this isn't going to do it for you because you're not going to have access to the clarity aspect right away. That said, overall for a lot of content, it's pretty good because it's covering a ton of bases. You just need a longer fight, and especially one that doesn't require a clarity early on. Some weapons for Lumberjack. I'm going to only call a few because there's a ton of good harps and axes actually. The Dark Opus weapon for Earth is obviously a harp, both forms. If you're not familiar with Dark Opus weapons, they all have this effect where you gain a crest when you charge attack. That's only going to be relevant depending on what characters and summons you're running. However, you can change their other charge attack parameters. As you know, you can slot different keys for different cap ups and stamina or MD, all that shit, but that stuff also changes the charge attack. So common one for Earth is going to be like charge attack damage cap up on your Dark Opus, in which case your charge attack will also give you 20% charge bar gain up on all allies. Nice. And stamina is also common on Earth harps. That gives you a heal on charge attack. And its cap is 1500. So essentially, like it heals for as much as Dappled Sunlight does. Very, very nice setup for the harp. The other Earth harp that people are going to think of is Crude Judgment Leer. This thing gives you a revitalized and then up to a 2k heal on charge attack. You're going to notice a pattern. Most of the harps will actually do a heal. It's also got this thing where if it's your main weapon, you get 55% double attack rate up, 30% triple attack rate up while high voltage in effect. High voltage is a thing that you get on like Elysian. It happens. It's a stacking attack and defense up if you cast Overture too. But yeah, let's talk about some other elements. Let's see, who else has a harp? If you're talking dark, There is Sunya. This is Ray's Harp. Gives you Veil and Refresh. Again, it does heal. Ray's Harp's actually a really good dark weapon for longer fights. It's got Enmity on it, always great, but it's also got Progression on it. Not necessarily a great setup if you're trying to do like really bursty Enmity Dark, but Lumberjack isn't really suited to really bursty Enmity Dark anyway. Other Dark Harp that's good, is it a Leer? Yeah, Leer. Liar, however you say it. Quillen's Leer is actually really interesting because its charge attack is remove one debuff from all parties. That's the whole raid. So you're actually doing a full clarity on the whole raid every time you charge attack. That can be a big deal. When it's main weapon though, you have immunity skill ceiling debuffs, 20% debuff success rate up, and 20% skill damage cap up. That's potentially really strong in some setups, so keep that one in mind. I think for light, my number one recommendation for weapon would be Certificus. This is Granvira's axe. It does like normal Grand weapon stuff. Massive light attack, medium charge attack damage, and charge attack damage cap up. But its charge attack here is actually pretty solid for Lumberjack. It's 40% defense up and then 30% data, double attack, triple attack up. Light's an element that can still benefit from data because it doesn't have a ton of guaranteed triple attack characters. The defense, though, actually is pretty relevant specifically for Lumberjack, because Lumberjack, again, is for longer fights. So you want to minimize the amount of damage you take so you don't get attritioned out. Wind has a couple of solid harps. I would recommend the Astral Weapon, Innocent Love. Its charge attack is 50-30 crit, which is pretty nice, and then 20% wind attack up. In addition to the Unworldly EX mod on it, it's got this thing when it's your main so I should say all Astral weapons have this sort of thing. When they're your main weapon, they'll have some kind of damage cap up based on a condition. So for this one, it is one main weapon, boost to wins one foe attack damage cap based on the number of buffs. So your auto damage is going to go up based on the number of buffs on a character. When you take these things to 5-star all the way uncapped, then it removes the one main weapon caveat. So if this is in your grid at all, you'll get this cap up. But getting these to 5-star uncap is actually going to be tricky for some people because that's going to require Beelzebub HL runs. So it's nice that you're able to main hand it here because if you're not quite able to do Beelzebub HL, you still get this effect. The other one I would call out is, what is it called? Last Storm Harp. Magna options for anybody who's gonna want to play Magna. This thing's main, this thing's charge attack is gonna be 20% data, double attack, triple attack, and mirror image for main character. That's fine. That's like a pretty decent effect. In addition to that, for Magna, it's a pretty solid weapon. It's medium stamina, big crit. So both those are good weapons for Wind. For Fire, I would recommend the Astral Weapon again, Soul Remnant as a main hand. This is an axe. It is on charge attack, guaranteed triple attack, and then 10% damage amplify. Very solid. In addition to that, just like Innocent Love, if you can't 5-star uncap this, then main handing it gets you access to this effect. It's not technically a damage cap up, but it's 10% bonus fire damage on triple attack. Very nice. In addition, if you don't want to run that, you can also run True Infernal Flame Scythe. This inflicts burned and gives 30% data to your team. Very nice. One is your main hand. You're going to do 20% bonus damage to foes that have burned on them with normal attacks and charge attacks. Very solid. If you want to run a harp, there is Karak. This is Mugen's weapon. It's a grand weapon. It's going to give you 15% damage cap up and revitalize on charge attack. Very solid. Much like Sunya, it's going to give you progression and then majesty instead of enmity here. Very, very good weapon. There's one more, and I don't remember what it is called. Draconic weapons. Yes, the Draconic weapon for fire is also a harp. This thing's going to give mirror image and refresh. And then it's got a whole ton of different things you can slot. So keep that in mind. This is another solid option for fire. As far as I can remember, water doesn't have a lot of good axes or harps. The one that comes to mind immediately is Dante Alighieri. Its charge attack is 25% debuff success and then stamina. The stamina is nice, the debuff success is whatever. But when it's your main weapon, you do a 300% water damage counter whenever the foe uses a special attack, and then additionally it stacks 50% attack down, 15% defense down, up to a maximum of 30, which is pretty solid. Honestly, though, I'm calling this one out because I can't think of a ton of good options for water. There are axes, there are harps, but I don't think any of them are super standout. I mean, I guess there's like this is not standout, but if you're playing water in Magna, then Europa's harp is a harp, and it's fine in Magna, so that's an option. Moving on from water, Clash Champion weapons. Gonna be honest with you here, I really haven't been looking into these for the new classes very much, so we're gonna learn together if this one's any good. This is Tall Tale Teller. This is the axe for Lumberjack. They also get a harp. This thing they've been doing with the new classes where they give them a Clash Champion weapon for each of their specialties. So Cavalier is like that, Monk is like that. Let's look at it. Secluded Cabin. 30% skill damage up, 10% skill damage cap up on charge attack. Okay. Rugged Woodcutter's Nature. One main weapon, main character only, gains a 30% bonus elemental damage effect while Woodcutter's Song is in effect, so 30% echo. Rugged Woodcutter's Apex. One main weapon, main character only, gain Keen on the first cast of Laughing Logger onwards, 15% damage cap up from second cast onwards. Okay, I'm gonna get real with you here. There was a point in time that has long since passed where you can make a legitimate argument to run Clash Champion weapons in a lot of good grids for certain classes. Not so much the case anymore. There's really only a few Clash Champion weapons that you could justify using in a grid that has better options. One of them is John Doe, specifically for Enmity Dark skill damage. If you've seen that video, this is pretty good because of this specific seal emblem right here, because it makes you auto nuke if you don't take damage in a turn. In skill damage dark, it's going to be like over 2 million damage, and it's not going to incur lockout, so that's why you use this. It's only going to be really good in skill damage dark enmity. Storyteller, you can make a case for it because it gives you bounty, but really you're specifically going to use that on farming. I guess you could use Unsigned Kanashige still on Kengo for charge attack memes. You can also use it in certain one-turn kill setups for Tricep Ore as an offhand to give everyone full charge bar, but that's going to be very specific. People make a case for Double Finger, which is totally legit if you're using Tormentor, but again, that's gonna depend entirely on what fight you're doing, because Tormentor is really only a class you use for souling tremendously hard content. So, why have Clash Champion weapons fallen off so much? That is a good question. The reason why Clash Champion weapons aren't popular in meta grids anymore is pretty simple. They don't have an attack skill on them at all. That goes for all of them. That means you're essentially running 9 weapons in your grid instead of 10, and that's an issue, because as the quality of weapons available for grids go up, it becomes really hard to justify running something that's essentially a dead slot because it has no attack mod on it. For the vast majority of classes and teams, you're not going to be able to make a justification of trading an entire slot just for the effects the weapon brings. The only exceptions to that are very specific, so like farming with Storyteller, or in the case of John Doe, you have to consider the element you're talking about here. We're talking Enmity Dark. Enmity Dark does so much damage from its enmity, it doesn't really matter that you are running one dead slot, because you're still going to hit for damage cap most of the time. And because of that, it's a worthwhile trade-off to run one dead weapon slot in order to get this extra damage proc in here, which is pretty sizable in that specific element. Not so the case with pretty much everything else. So is Tall Tale Teller any good? Well, if it had an attack skill on it, it'd be an amazing weapon, but it doesn't. So it's not great. The other issue of it is you have to main hand this, and that goes for really all the Clash Champion weapons again. You have to main hand them. because of the quality of axes and harps available to Lumberjack, comes real hard to justify running this instead of one of those, especially because this charge attack is not that great either. Yeah, skill damage up and skill damage cap up is potentially good, but it's only going to be good for specific elements and teams, because not every element wants to run a lot of skill damage, and Lumberjack itself doesn't have enough skill damage to justify this. The rest of the effects are good, though. I mean, like Echo on Woodcutter Song, 30% Echo, that's extremely solid. It's only main character, but still a lot of damage for the main character. This one, I'm less of a fan of it, actually, because this basically lets you get the second and third cast effects on Laughing Logger one cast sooner. And, like, that's not a compelling argument, because that means after the second cast you already have all the effects, so the third cast is exactly the same as the second. You're only gaining a little bit extra speed on getting out this damage cap. That's not that great. So yeah, overall, this thing, yeah, no, I can't recommend it. It's not great. Also, interesting thing to note, I don't think these new weapons take emblems, because it's not listing here the different emblems you can slot in. What I mean by that is, if you look at John Doe again, there's a bunch of alternate skills you can get. The alternate skills come from the specific emblems you stick in, so I guess they're not doing that anymore. Let's talk about the harp. Rip Van Winkle, what do you do? Charge attack is Secluded Cabin again. Gives you 15% healing up and 50% healing cap up on charge attack. Okay. Kind Woodcutter's Nature, one main weapon. All other allies gain 2500 shield upon using Leaf Burning. Okay. Kind Woodcutter's Apex, one main weapon. Remove one debuff from all allies from the first cast of Dappled Sunlight onward, and grant all allies Veil from the second cast onwards. This weapon's a big yikes. Yikes forever to this weapon. This is not a good weapon. Even if this thing had attack up on it, I would have a hard time justifying this thing. Here's the thing. 15% healing up. Whatever. It's the 50% healing cap up you care about. And that's fine. Healing cap up is good. But it doesn't heal. This thing doesn't heal in and of itself. That's quite underwhelming, given most of the other harps you would run instead of this do heal. The cap up is just not that big a deal. It doesn't also come with a heal. Like, that's not great at all. I don't know why this thing doesn't also heal like most of the other harps. Kind Woodcutter's Nature. All other allies gain 2500 shield. Okay, note a thing here. It's all other allies. So main character doesn't get this. So, refresher on Leaf Burning once again. This thing gives you a 4000 damage shield. The main character, not all of your allies. While that shield's in effect, every turn that you still have the shield, you get these stacking buffs. We just talked about that. So I guess what this effectively does is, when you cast Leaf Burning, it's going to shield both you and your team. Your team for less than you, but also your team. So it makes it, like, it makes it a better skill in that regard. There's a couple issues there, though. It doesn't affect the main character, so it doesn't help that 4000 damage shield. This would be okay if it also helped the main character, so it became like a 6500 damage shield on main character, and that would be decent because it will let you keep Leaf Burning up longer. Without that, this effectively is just kind of a team heal that doesn't hit main character on Leaf Burning. So Leaf Burning is effectively like kind of a heal for 2500. It's a shield, not a heal, but you know what I mean. The issue there is Leaf Burning is a 10-turn cooldown. So that's a pretty long-ass cooldown for an effect like this otherwise. So yes, it does make it better, but it could be more synergistic than it is, and right now it's not enough to really make this a worthwhile weapon. The second thing, Kind Woodcutter's Nature, or Apex, sorry, I like this better than the Axe version, because one of the legitimate issues with running Dappled Sunlight as your only clarity is if the boss tends to cast a debuff that's really important to remove early, you can't use Dappled Sunlight as your only clarity, otherwise you won't be able to remove that. that's more relevant here. Same thing applies, like, you're only getting these effects earlier, so if you... if the fight goes long and you didn't need to remove a debuff early, then, like, this effect is kind of meaningless, because, like, if it goes long enough that you already get all these things, getting it early is not that big a deal. So yeah, like, even in the context of other Clash Champion weapons, this one's kind of mediocre. So neither Clash Champion weapons on Lumberjack are really gonna be worth it. And that's par for the course with most Clash Champion weapons, sad to say, these days. There's gonna be a few exceptions. We can talk about them as we talk about those classes, but neither of these are particularly good. Alright, Lumberjack, conclusions. Overall, I really like this class. I think it's one of the better of the recent classes that have come out. It is, however, specifically good for long fights that are on the harder side. For easy fights, for short fights, Lumberjack's not a great option. It's not a great class to farm your dailies with, for example, because it doesn't have anything that really gives it the ability to jump off the start line and do amazing things. It's more about long-term effects and, like, attrition fights, because if you just look at the skills, multiple of the skills do something if you cast them a second and third time, and obviously you can't do that in a short fight. Multiple skills stack over time, so, like, you stack attack down, you stack defense down. Those aren't going to be valuable in a short fight. But for harder content, Lumberjack's a very solid option. Like, I think Tormentor is the go-to if you want to solo really, really, really hard content. But if you're not going to that level, Lumberjack is a solid choice. So definitely recommend you check out Lumberjack. It's going to be a little bit tricky for newer players to unlock because it does require you max out Berserker and Elysian first, but I think it's a worthwhile investment. It will get you through some fights that you're not going to be able to get through as other classes. Anyways, if you have found this helpful, leave a comment. I hope you guys enjoyed this. See you later.